The Christian and self-defense. Here's a question for you. Jesus said, turn the other cheek. What does that mean, though, for self-defense? Did Jesus believe in self-defense? Are we to always turn the other cheek, or is there a time and a place to stand your ground and defend your family, your friends, your church family, and, yes, your own life? It's a good question. Let's explore that today. Howdy. Jonathan Fiala, for every day, and today this segment's The Apologist, but we actually have on a special guest, Mr. Jerry. How's it going?
Great. Good to be here.
Glad to have you here. You are actually the director of church safety at a church in Houston, Texas.
Yes, sir. That is true.
So I got Steve here. I'm going to introduce him real quick. How's it going?
Hey, I'm doing good, man.
Glad to have you here.
Stepping outside the box.
Actually, it was Steve.
Or living outside of it.
Living outside always.
Yes.
So Steve and Charlie actually were the ones that suggested that we bring on Mr. Jerry, and I'm actually honored to have you here. Could you describe real quick for the audience what your job entails?
Okay. So from the church safety point of view, it's kind of all-encompassing in that churches face several possibility of several threats. It can be a fire inside the building. How do we evacuate people and get them out safely? Natural disasters like hurricanes, those kind of things, which, by the way, we have one potentially heading our way. Just want to encourage people to get ready for that.
Absolutely.
Because there comes a point where it's too late. So, and then also external threats, such as protesters, people who want to disrupt service, and of course, the worst part being shooters, mass shooters who come in trying to do major amounts of damage. And, you know, today we do face an internal threat from those who desire to hurt the more vulnerable parts of our society, children, sometimes elderly. So it kind of includes all of that stuff.
I gotcha. So today, I actually wanted to put forward to you a couple of different varieties of episodes or events that have happened in the last so many years. And these are church shootings. By the way, if you have kids in the room, today is going to be a rougher day than most. So just be advised. But we are going to be looking at and reacting to a bunch of church shootings. We're going to start off with the one at Joel Olsteen's church, Lakewood in Houston. And I'm going to turn the volume off or really low. And I actually want to kind of commentate, and I want your thoughts as well, because in fact, I think I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit here. You were talking earlier, before we dip into this specifically, there's a whole set of philosophy before we get to the point of a escalation of force. Mm-hmm. You were starting to speak to that before we got on mic. What exactly is that? What do you tell team members whenever you're organizing volunteers or paid security as far as escalation and de-escalation?
Okay. So in my point of view, we are first and foremost here to be peacemakers. You know, in the Beatitudes, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be the children of God." And so that verse to me is very important. But there are several other verses that talk about, primarily as Christians, we are people of peace. And we strive, if you will, to maintain peace in that area. One verse refers to, as far as it depends on us, live at peace with everyone. So what that verse indicates is, yes, we want to be peaceful, but that's not always going to depend on us. When we encounter people, you know, we always have to remember that our world is broken. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't have needed Jesus in the first place. And we're going to encounter people who are broken. The ultimate blessing for me is to be able to engage those broken people in a way that we help them find healing for whatever is going on in them at the time.
And I mean, you're speaking to someone who comes in who is somewhat disturbed or having a bad day, and they're just restless in a problem.
Yes.
And so I think that's something that we really need to latch on to, because there's a lot of Christians out there who carry it, at church. I carry every day, right? But they kind of have this fantasy of being the one to stop the shooting. And look, that's not a bad, we all do.
Yeah.
All of us men who are in that mindset do that. But that's not really the point, because our objective is to be the peacemaker. Sometimes people also miss this. Attaining peace sometimes comes through violence. And
That is true.
you look at Christ. Christ went through one of the ultimate acts of violence. Some would say the ultimate act of violence to attain peace in the future. So there are times for that, but it's not every day.
Correct.
And it shouldn't be your mindset.
Correct.
I tell people, I'm an NRA instructor and trained as such, and, I do medical training for first responders. I tell people, if you don't carry a trauma kit in your truck and you every day carry a gun,
Yeah.
you forgot about a very important part of this whole conversation. So,
Yeah, I think anytime, whatever the situation is, adrenaline always kicks in. If there's a stressful situation and the adrenaline starts pumping, we almost become primal unless we've taught ourselves how to not be primal in a sense, in that instance like that. And, when we get to that point, we're going to hit one of two modes, the fight mode or the flight mode. And so to be able to maintain a more level perspective where, we want to see if we can engage the person in such a way that we can touch whatever is going on inside of them. One of the biggest things we try to prepare for is mental distress in people has gone up immensely over the last several years. And, they're people just like us who have a challenge that we may or may not understand, but we probably don't know, and we won't know if our first decision is to take the person out, so to speak, begin some type of violent altercation, which should always be the last desire if possible.
100%. 100%. And so that's something that I think we really need to keep in mind, that at the end of the day, our objective is restoration.
Absolutely.
If possible. That's always our objective. Now, sometimes you can't restore. Sometimes things are too far. And the great study of this, or case study of this, is the shooting at Lakewood. And so I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick. I'm going to put this up here. And tell me to pause if you want. There are many camera angles. Link in the description below, as always, folks. But here is the video. We're going to kind of watch it and follow along. Mr. Jerry, Steve, you've been quiet. If you have any thoughts, tell me to pause it. But what you have here is first shots, and this is from the body cam. Now, what you see ahead is a volunteer security.
Yeah, I think this was one of the police officers.
Yes, this is her body cam.
3639.
Notice where they're not.
Units now.
Right. And notice where she goes.
So
We are Lakewood Church.
what's happening right now is you have a church staffer or volunteer actually confronting the individual, and these two officers are not confronting. Say it that way.
And this is either due to lack of proper type of training, which a lot of police forces don't get for this type of situations. You know, they don't get the kind of training that they need for these types of situations.
Now, I don't mind the flanking maneuver. I would, if it was a flanking maneuver, but then they turn around. But I definitely would have put that into effect a lot sooner while she actually is shooting. Her kid gets hit in the middle of this. Thankfully, she's a bad shot. Speaking about the shooter.
And I think it's important to point out, right now, we don't hear a lot of shots going off. And so they are trying to position themselves to have a full engagement, if you will.
So up ahead, though, you do have that one lone staffer, deacon, volunteer, whatever. He's the one who's engaging. I'm not saying that I would be any better than these two officers are.
Me either. I mean,
but it does bring up the question. You see, this guy's been engaging this whole time.
And this gentleman in the
suit
is the
only response.
Right, is the only response that has been taken, period.
And that's the shooter's child there. Unfortunately, she decided to bring her kid with her.
Such a shame.
Evil, actually. Now, that's a legitimate concern, actually.
Yes.
And by the way, that's an impressive shot. The fisheye makes it look further, but that's at least 20, 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And the perp is behind cover, as you'll see in a moment. So this is good, doing everything you can to stabilize the victims on scene. That's 100% what you want. Officers tend to carry not only tourniquets, but sometimes pressure bandages, depending upon what's on their belt. So that's all good. So anyway, thoughts on that one? Starting with you, Jerry.
All right. So
collect some thoughts.
You know, when you watch the video, I think it's important to remind ourselves of a couple of things. First of all, this lady was in some kind of distress. And it is unfortunate, you pointed this out, that she involved her own child in that, and the child wound up getting injured.
It kind of speaks to the issue.
Yeah. And, you know, but that's a situation where once she starts firing, then, you know, you become a wall, if you will, between the people you are there to protect and the perpetrator. And, you know, there may not be much chance for peace, so to speak. She was asked many times to put the gun down, and she chose not to do that. And, you know, in that instance, unfortunately, sometimes lethal force is necessary.
Absolutely. Steve?
Yeah, and, you know, I have a tendency to go along with Jerry there, and when someone walks in with a gun like she did, refusing to put her gun down, talking about having a bomb, it makes it real difficult to have de-escalation talks with a person. Now, I can talk and work to try to de-escalate a person, but if that person's not willing,
it's
like
not
she's not willing,
Correct.
then that's where lethal force has to come in, especially when she's threatening to do what she's done and then starts firing rounds off. And her purpose is to put people to death. I mean, that was her whole purpose.
So I just want to put this in y'all's minds for a moment, because we'll be talking about this shortly. But some people would say that, blessed are the death of those, who die in God's name, right? So I think, though, that there's also it's incumbent on us as Christians, especially as Christian men, to be that wall, right? We can be peaceful, but like I said before, sometimes peace is obtained through violence. Peace is actually always obtained through violence. Yeah. It's always set by deterrence, and deterrence is always violent. And however much you allow people to cross that boundary, and as a society, we've decided to A, get rid of the death penalty, B, lower prison sentences. Big advocate against prisons personally. I think that there should be, biblical law was capital punishment, or you had to pay it back, restitution, or public caning, beating, the prison system, as long as we have it, though, we should be giving maximum sentences. We shouldn't be letting someone out in 2 years for mass shootings, which does happen. Yes. Which literally happens, and they go out a couple of years later. We did a podcast where one of them strangled his own kid. One of them got involved in another mass shooting, and we just let these people off. So on our, and that's a societal thing, but on our front, we can draw a line and say, we are protecting our churches. You need to go somewhere else if you want to inflict a mass casualty event.
Yeah. I think anytime somebody comes with the intent of doing maximum harm, whatever that means, then if we can stop them on the outside, life is going to be better for everybody, but especially those on the inside who we are, I do believe, not only asked by leaders in the church to do that, but I believe throughout Scripture we see God ordaining, if you will, the owning of instruments of defense.
100%.
Now, they didn't have guns back then, but they used what they had to protect themselves. And sometimes that's just the way the world goes.
Yeah, and that's Luke 22:35-37. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one.
Mm-hmm.
And, they said, hey, we've got two. Christ says, that's enough. That'll do. Mm-hmm. So it's not to be our personality. It's not to be our main drive and focus, but rather our drive and focus is to be those who were acting God's will on earth, and part of that is thwarting evil. In America, we're in the very, very unique situation of being able to carry, where actually that's delegated to us by the law. So in Ezekiel 33:6, if the watchman on the wall sees trouble and does not sound the horn, the innocent blood that is shed will be accounted of him.
Yes.
Right? So there is something to be said there. Here's another deacon, actually. And this is via NRA. And again, link in the description below, as always. This is the little puff piece that they did, and we'll see if we can find the actual footage. I believe it's on here, though. So, Mr. Steve, you ready?
I am ready.
One thing that has been proven to stop a bad guy with a gun, and that's a good guy with a gun. Sadly, this is something I learned from experience on a fateful Sunday morning.
We'll come back to this.
Yeah, that's me. Gun control and gun-free zones don't stop criminals. They create helpless victims with no means to defend themselves from evil. Criminals have never followed the law, and I promise you they don't intend to start now. When seconds count and police could be minutes or even an hour away, it's vital that law-abiding citizens are empowered to protect our schools, churches, and local communities. The wolves are always right outside the door. There is no sign or law that will stop them, but a bullet will. My name is Jack Wilson, and I am a proud lifetime member of the National Rifle Association.
So, I heard you winding up to say something there. I heard a.
Well, so let me preface what I'm going to say with this. I agree with 100% with what he's saying. Okay, signs are not going to stop evil people. It's you have to match what they have, so to speak, to be able to end a threat. And I mean, kudos to the bravery of this man for taking the other guy on and eliminating the threat to the congregation. But at the same time, I think we always have to bear in mind not just the whole idea about peacemaking, but the cause and effect that a situation like that can have on the people around them.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
You know, he did everything he should have done. Okay. But having to shoot over people is always a scary thing for me.
Oh, yeah.
That, you know, what if one of them accidentally stands up and, you know, nobody wants to be responsible for taking the life of an innocent person or injuring them even. And again, kudos to him. He obviously has some great training. If I remember correctly, he was in the military at one point.
And a good marksman.
Yes.
I think he was a firearm instructor too.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah.
You know, and so I can tell you one of the things that I try to emphasize is that we be sure of our proficiency with a firearm, because without proficiency on our part, then the opportunity for us to injure innocent people is
High.
yes.
It's high.
Yeah.
So let's actually look at this in a little bit more depth. I'm going to see if I can pull this up, make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to just do one thing here. Here we go. All right. So what we can see here is the whole layout. And they've actually done a nice little job circling it for us. So you can see our deacon here. This individual right here has already, he squeezes off 2 rounds. He kills 2 deacons.
Yeah.
Or the pastor, I forget who. But you're in this situation where he's coming from this nice place right here. Everyone ducks, which is, by the way, I don't know if that's just pure fear response or of good training or if he yelled down.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, from a number of videos that I watch on situations such as this, it's a common thing in situations like this for people to duck and get down because it's an instinct for people to hide and get down and get away. It's that
be careful,
fight or flight response, and it's a flight thing to getting away from the mic, to drop and to find cover is what the idea is.
So positive there, just make sure that you keep your head down if that ends up being you in that situation, because that would really stink. Now when he fires, he actually has that clean shot. But you're right. That is a very scary thing.
Yeah, you see there's a smaller group of people that the shooter is trying to move behind, and you know it's a tough deal to have to shoot over the top of people that you know, like, and love, and
very much so.
You know, it's again. The guy had the training. He was proficient with his gun, and I think that's always important for whoever we are. If we are going to have a gun And as you were mentioning earlier, John, we have the right to do that. But we also have the responsibility to make sure that we can use that gun proficiently if we ever have to.
100%. I mean, if you're going to have a tool, make sure that you know how to use it so you don't bludgeon someone else to death with it.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think is sometimes forgotten. We go and we buy the nicest, most expensive thing, and then we don't buy range ammo. Mm-hmm. And again, I can't say this enough. As someone who trains, first responders, it's if you're in that mass casualty situation, the carry an extra mag, get training. I carry 30+1 because some people say, well, that's crazy. Well, look at this guy needed 2, okay? 2 or 3 rounds. I don't know how many he put. He only needed 2 or 3 because the first one was on target. The Lakewood, the guy needed a lot.
Yeah.
He did multiple mag changes.
Yeah.
I don't know how many it was, but he did multiple mag changes.
I think he went through 2 mags.
So
the one he was shooting and another one.
carrying
that extra mag is a big deal.
Yeah, and I think in the Lakewood situation, let's use the one here that we were just talking about. If you watch how the perpetrator starts moving, he's basically trying to develop human shields. Okay, the shooter at Lakewood was behind cover, and so you're always going to use more shots, or maybe not always, but atypically you are going to miss a few times because they can duck and weave too.
Yep.
To get out of the way, which is going to be their intent.
And by the way, get training, because going to the range is good. I'm not 100% part of your regiment, but you are only at 10% of what you need to be able to get through a situation like that with the highest chance of survival if you don't have movement fundamentals.
Yeah.
Because moving through a doorway, and I'm sorry, those officers did not have movement fundamentals.
No.
If they did, they would have moved, they would have split the pie, and they would have moved very carefully, watching at the horizon for that individual. But they forgot it, or they weren't trained well enough on mass casualty encounters.
Yeah. They spent, just to add to that, they did not move very quickly.
Yeah.
In the direction of the shooter. Now, we may all want to be that guy, but none of us wants to be the first to die either.
Correct.
Yet at the same time, there is a responsibility there to not only be proficient with your gun, but be proficient in your training that typically teaches you have to move toward the threat as quickly as you can safely do so, but you still have to be making progress, if you will.
Get some live fire training. And by the way, I know it's easy to go and say that, because a live fire course will cost anywhere between $400 and $1,200.
Right.
But you get it from a reputable instructor like Travis Haley or one of those guys. You'll get really good training and movement fundamentals down. I think it's actually worth it if you can afford it and you're serious about being prepared. It's going to keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
So just a thought there for y'all to consider out there. Any thoughts, Steve? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tag in on what you were saying about live fire training. The live fire training, there are, like you said, good people and okay people to get it from. What I have seen, I've taken a few live fire classes, and some of the ones that I've taken them from, the better ones that I have taken them from were people that were actually in live fire situations.
Yeah.
In true, actual live fire situations.
Find a reputable person.
Exactly. They were either military or SWAT.
Those are the sorts of folks you want to get it from.
And exactly. Because typically they have the experience, they know what's going on, especially military people who do CQB type kind of stuff. They know how to go in, split the pie when moving in and clearing rooms, whether it is with a pistol or whether it's with an
Rifle
SBR,
shotgun.
you know, whether it's with a short barrel rifle or whatever you're doing, and it'll come out correctly. Excuse me, guys, I don't have that turned off. Okay. Excuse me there.
But no,
Sorry about that.
absolutely agreed.
And, you know, it's those types of situations that it calls for good training. And one of the things I learned during my martial arts days was that, like you had mentioned on movement, movement is the basis of all fighting, whether you're fighting with your hands, whether you're fighting with a gun, whether you're fighting with any kind of instrument. You've got to move. You or that other person is going to be moving, and it's what keeps you alive, and they're trying to stay alive. So you need to know how to fight with both of you moving.
Mm-hmm. When I was doing a little bit of work with some folks who were quite well trained, they were talking to the younger guys in the crowd, and they said, contrary to popular belief, you blanking blanks, it's better if you're blanking moving when you're shooting, because you can still hit stuff when you're moving, and it's harder for them to hit you. So get off blankety blank X.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they're right. You need to move, and so movement fundamentals are really important.
Yeah, I think it might be important for us to point out that when we talk about live fire, it doesn't mean we're shooting actual bullets at each other that are going to.
It's either a kill house or simunition.
Yeah.
Simunition, by the way, is really good. Airsoft is a cheaper alternative. Airsoft does not at all replicate the way simunition does. It hurts a lot less.
Yeah. It's going to hurt. You're going to get hit with something, but
you know you've been hit.
The goal is not to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. So find someone somewhere that you can get some good training with, because that's important. And sometimes it'll actually come home to your family. And case in point, here's another NRA story, and this one was not publicized at all. Unfortunately, this gentleman actually was at a party at his house, and I'll let him tell his story, because it is tragic, but ultimately I think important for us to check out. So let's go ahead and.
I'd rather look like this than be lying dead next to my family. This right here is the only reason we're alive. No one ever told my story, and we all know why. My name is Raul. On July 3rd this year, we were celebrating our freedom at a friend's house when the unthinkable happened. A neighbor we never met came in uninvited and started shooting at all of us right out of the blue. Before I can actually comprehend what was happening, one of our dear friends was shot and died instantly. Next thing you know, the shooter shot me right in the side of the head and through my left eye. I hit the ground unconscious. Everyone in the house was screaming bloody murder and thought I was dead, including my family, who sprinted to a nearby bedroom and tried barricading themselves. What felt like an eternity passed, and then my eyes opened by God's grace to the sound of the shrieking screams of my wife, 2 daughters, and friends who knew I carried a concealed pistol. After a short struggle against 2 brave friends, the shooter broke away from the fight and started to reach for his second gun, with my family lined up as his next victims. But I put 4 shots in his chest and sent him straight to hell. If I didn't have my gun, everyone in that house would have died. The news vans would have been front and center, but because I did, we never even heard about it. In fact, each year, over 1 million law-abiding Americans use firearms to protect themselves and their loved ones. But in 2021, America's 5 largest newspapers published just 10 news stories reporting defensive firearm use. In contrast, Those same newspapers had a total of 1,743 news stories containing the keywords murder, gunfire, or shot. We still have no idea why that man opened fire that day, but it has only reinforced our family's support for the Second Amendment. I was in the hospital for 5 days, and when I finally got out, I bought my family 2 handguns to train with. Evil will always exist, and we are more ready to confront it with equal force now more than ever. This family will never be victims again. My name is Raul Mendez, and I am a proud lifetime member of the National Rifle Association of America.
So, any thoughts or salient points you want to bring out?
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. And, you know, it just lets you know that just because you're in your home doesn't mean
You're
you
safe.
shouldn't be armed. I mean, I'll walk around the house carrying my firearm at times. You don't know when something's going to happen. I mean, I watch a number of different podcasts on church-type security stuff to see what all's just going on in the world. And you would not believe the type of stuff that goes on in America and overseas in Europe, in England and stuff, the amount of attacks that go on that people never hear about because they're defended by people with firearms, so you're not going to hear about it.
Well, certainly, I think the media likes to use stories that make more gun control look good. Okay?
Correct.
Now, are there people in the world that probably shouldn't have guns? Absolutely. I think there are. But they have that right. And so we can't and shouldn't take that right away from them.
Correct.
But at the same time, when they fail to, so they glamorize one side and they rarely mention the other side. I think something that's missed there, if they would mention the other side more often, there's going to be more responsible people with guns than there are irresponsible people with guns. And just like this guy right here who went out and bought 2 handguns and had his family trained in how to use them. Well, they're going to be able to protect themselves from some guy who got a gun, however he got it, whose only purpose was to use it to inflict harm on others.
Correct.
You know, I've had the privilege and thankful for the ability to buy several guns in my life, but never once did I buy one with the intent of hurting a fellow human being. You know, I bought them to protect myself. I don't hunt near as much as I used to, but I do like to occasionally hunt and stuff like that. And so good people with guns are a positive thing as long as everybody's using them with the intent that they were purchased for.
Well, and you look at actual statistics that are provided by, say, the FBI. They say 4% of shootings are prevented by a good guy with a gun. Mm-hmm. The Center for Crime Research Prevention actually came out with a study, and they said actually it's 34% on average over the last decade, and in 2021 it was closer to 50%. And what they said was what you're not counting is stoppages, and you're not counting specific types of shootings or police reports, because a lot of the time the gun never goes off, right? And so there's instances of road rage. There's instances of people coming to that picnic or the barbecue at the house, and the gun's pulled, and the perpetrator leaves, right? So they absolutely do not want to describe that. By the way, we did a whole podcast on this. 34% of shootings are stopped by a good guy with a gun, and the vast majority of them are bloodless. The vast majority are bloodless because you actually are able to stop. And that number that he shared, it's anywhere between 500,000 every year, 500,000 defensive uses of a firearm to 3 million, depending upon whose numbers you're using and what year it is, because it's very hard to like translate what that is. I would say that as far as like hard data, because it's hard to know which guns would have gone off if the police would have showed up, blah, blah, blah. But it's a hard number. We do have hard numbers, though, on homicides that guns were used in. Self-homicides account for 20,000 a year. Pre-COVID, I believe it's gone up. These are pre-COVID stats. And it was 10,000 a year were actual homicides. Post-COVID, BLM, it's higher. It's closer to 40 to 50,000. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. It's high. And the homicides have gone up due to lawlessness. 500,000, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, versus 50,000. If it just saves one life, is their response, right, about gun control,
Right.
it saves 10 times the life. So how can we as Christians have this perspective? Well, I think I laid it out logically, but let's lay it out biblically. Let's kind of dig into that for a second. First off, Exodus. We'll start with Exodus. I alluded to it earlier, 22, 2 through 3. Does anyone want to get that? You want to get that, Mr. Jerry?
Says, if a thief is caught in the act of breaking into a house and is struck and killed in the process, the person who killed the thief is not guilty of murder. But if it happens in daylight, the one who killed the thief is guilty of murder.
So let's break that down. And I kind of laid it out a little bit earlier. What seems to be the rubric there? If the thief comes in the middle of the night and you kill him, you're not going to be held liable. But if the sun rises and you go and kill him,
Yeah,
it's murder.
different thing.
So if I can just lay that out a little bit with a finer point, if you are capable of deterring or running off the person, you're not supposed to shoot them out as they're jumping out the back window, right? That's not necessarily, if they're on your property, maybe they're going to pivot, whatever. But if they're in the neighbor's property, we know that's not.
Yeah, I think there comes a point where you go from trying to protect yourself to intentionally trying to harm someone. Correct. And that is something that I think this verse is actually referring to, that there is a point, and this is where I really think that situational awareness is important for us, because if we read the situation and understand the situation, I think we're going to be more logical in our response to the situation. Somebody who breaks in to your home in the middle of the night, they're probably not there to say hello. How are you doing? They're there
Correct.
with bad intentions. And one of the things I love about Texas is we have every right to defend ourselves in that moment. Now, if they are heading out the door, or if they're in another location or whatever, and we go after them, then our whole intention has changed.
Correct. It's from being that wall that you spoke of earlier,
Right,
against violence and evil, and now we are aggressively pursuing as an individual, not as a society.
correct.
But as an individual, we're taking it on ourselves because in God's law, you always had the men at the gate were the judges. It talks about the people at the gate. Those were the judges of the day, and you were always to bring the issue to those judges. So if we're not bringing it to the law, then we're kind of taking it outside. We're actually putting ourselves in the position of judge, jury, and executioner in God's spot.
And we have to kind of look at the time of when this occurred. During that time, they had swords, spears, and bows. That were their weapons of choice at that time.
Very visceral.
Yes. And if someone came in at night, you knew what was happening because thieves worked under the cover of night because basically their only weapon was a sword or a knife. And then that's what they used. And you could get them away with a sword. Okay. Now, in today's society, things are a little bit different because you have firearms and you got punks out there that nowadays their time is not so much as at night, but during broad daylight.
Yeah.
I mean, most house thefts and break-ins occur nowadays during the daylight hours.
Yeah, while everyone's
versus
at
at
work.
night.
Yeah.
So it's like you were saying, Jerry, you got to look at the situation and see how it is. Some people come in with no intention to do any harm to anybody, so they may come in and just want to tie you up and steal from you.
But you don't know that.
But you never know
That's it.
what they're going to do because they may have a firearm. You don't know their intent,
Well,
especially at night.
And even if they don't have a firearm, if it's your wife and kids, they have something else, and that's very common in those home invasions that people are violated. And so
Exactly.
there's a reality there that you have to remember. You're being that wall of safety.
You know, a lot of the home break-ins that we've seen in recent times come because a perpetrator kicks the front door open. Now, if somebody kicks your front door open, they're not there to say hi. They have an intent of some kind. If they have a weapon in their hand as they're doing that, well, the situation to me just became very dangerous for the people that I love. And so we're going to have a confrontation, he and I, of some kind. But if they kick the door open, they don't have a gun, then maybe they are just there to rob, steal stuff. And listen, I'd tell anybody, let him have your stuff. If that's all he's there for, let him have your stuff and be done with him. But if they come in and they do have a gun, and we have to consider how fast that decision has to be made.
That's why you should always have a light on your home defense weapon. I tell people it's either your neighbor stealing some milk from you, and you got to know that that's Bob, and so don't shoot Bob, or that's someone else. It could be your family member too. Like if you don't know, you hear that bump in the night, make sure you're able to identify.
Yeah, and it's tough because sometimes it's snap of a finger quick to make a decision.
That's it.
But I think we also have to remember this: we do live with whatever decision we make.
Mm-hmm.
The consequences of that decision, whether it be for our family or even for that person. Like I said, I've been privileged to be able to buy several guns, but I never bought one with the intention of harming a human being. And I honestly don't want to have to live with the consequences of doing that, should I ever have to. But it's the have to part that kind of changes the scope of things. Because there are times, or could be times, where we have to use force to defend the people we love.
Yeah, and I've been blessed. I've been in a couple of self-defense scenarios and, never actually had to pull the trigger. Just the presence of the gun was enough. Mm-hmm. And light and laser, really good thing. Really, 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 really helps. It's nice to be able to let someone know that, they're that little dot is not their friend.
Right.
And that they need to put their hands on their head.
Yeah.
And so having good tools, knowing how and when to use them, hopefully prevents you from needing to escalate to that level.
Yep, for sure.
So another verse so we already talked about Luke 22:35 through 39, but Luke 11:21 I think is a really good one. And Steve, could you go ahead and get that for us
Certainly.
real quick?
Luke 21, Luke 11:21. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own mansion, his property is safe. And that goes back to exactly what it was that we were just talking about a man having to do what needs to do in his home if something occurs.
Right.
And Jesus was using this actually as an analogy to the individual soul, and Christ coming in and dwelling, because our bodies are his temple, and saying that he's the strong man. If you've dealt with a demonic oppression or possession, there is a strong man who is going to reside, and you can't defend against, or you can't offend against that, because he is the strong man guarding his own wall. But it does kind of lend to property rights. It lends to, Christ is using an analogy that they would have all understood. They would have said, well, of course, if you have a strong man guarding his house, of course you're going to, and that's the righteous thing. And Christ in his righteousness is guarding us.
Right.
In the temple of the body and the soul, but also you have that right as a property owner. And Isaiah 49:25, I'll read this one. Who can snatch the plunder of war from the hands from the hands of the warrior? Don't know what's happening there with the audio. From the hands of the warrior, who can demand that a tyrant let his captives go? Again, you have this understanding of there is a benefit to being the stronger individual, and your people are safe when you are that individual.
Yeah, when you look at the word warrior here, I think the word is important, because when I think of a warrior, it is somebody who is prepared, but he also understands when is the right time to take action, because there is a right time and there can be a wrong time.
100%.
And I think a warrior is fully prepared to do whatever it takes. He just doesn't get in a hurry. He makes sure he becomes situationally aware and goes from there.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think we need to make sure that we are that situationally aware and prepared warrior, and do all things as unto the Lord. Do all things for his glory. Amen. Right?
Amen.
And so I don't want to do too many more verses, because we have a whole list. By the way, we'll drop these in the description below. But if you want to prepare and be ready to defend the idea of the Christian's right to self-defense, we have a whole list. The Psalms are amazing. Can you get Psalm 144:1?
Says, praise the Lord, who is my rock. He trains my hands for war and gives my fingers skill for battle.
Psalm 18:34, please.
18:34. He trains my hands for battle. He strengthens my arm to draw a bronze bow.
Psalm 82:4. Rescue the weak and needy people. Help them escape the power of the wicked. I think that almost is an imperative, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think some Christians kind of get the warrior mentality like a little bit weird, and it kind of becomes silly. But there is something important there. There's a calling to be men who protect and women who nurture as Christians. That is something that we're called to be and called to do. So I think we need to be careful and cautious how we go about it, but it does need to be done. Any closing thoughts?
So my basis for church safety centers around Nehemiah. And there's a point where Nehemiah is challenged to rebuild the wall. If you've read the Bible, you're probably familiar with the story. But in the context, the people of Israel are surrounded by enemies on all sides. And when we look at the world today, there's enemies come from all directions, if you will. But what Nehemiah did was created an environment in which they could do the work, but also keep an eye on what was happening and protect themselves. So he posted guards in different locations. He armed them, did all of those kind of things. And he did that not to be the evil one, but to protect his people from the evil that was being threatened toward them, because these enemies that surrounded them, they weren't just sitting out there, having a party. They were planning and plotting when they were going to attack the people and stop them from building the wall. So he did what he could do to create an environment where they could safely do what they do. And, that for me is something that is important for my home, important for the church that I serve at, that we just have systems in place that help protect and let people live their life, do their life. At the church, man, I want people to come to church and worship God. And so if systems need to be in place to allow them to do that, then I'm all for it. And however we get there is how we get there.
Absolutely. Steve.
Yeah, kind of on what Jerry was saying there, Nehemiah is a very important aspect on when you're looking at church security, because the church itself is just like during the time of Nehemiah. The church has the enemies that are out there that are surrounding it, and they're building up more and more as time goes on. And when you read Revelation, you see the things, what are going to happen and how the buildup is going to be against the church. So, and it's not like we're going to be able to go out there and use firearms to take out whatever's going on. It's going to be a big spiritual battle, but you're going to have other enemies that are human that are going to come and attack other people. And these people are going to want to protect those that are going to come to the church for protection. When people look for protection, where's one of the things they look to? The cops and the church. I mean, that's what people do. They come to the church for salvation, protection. They use God for protection. And when a big spiritual battle comes and that happens, cops ain't going to be able to help them. The one that's going to be able to help them is Jesus. Well, and they're going to be coming to the church.
And that's why the church is under persecution. That's why you see all of these shootings at churches. It's part of it. So just remember, in the last days, there's going to be persecution.
Exactly.
And so, look, I think there is a time to be a Stephen, and there's a time to be a David, right? So David was the warrior king. He protected his family, he protected his nation, and he fought valiantly and hard. When it comes time to be a Stephen and to be a martyr, you're going to be in a situation where self-defense is not an option, and all you can do is share the gospel and be a witness. God's going to provide you. If you're walking close with God in meekness and humility, you will know when the time is there to be a meek, humble martyr. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When you are in church, to all those churches out there that think that you shouldn't have a watchman on the wall, to have Nehemiah rebuilding the wall with a sword in one hand and a hammer or a brick in the other, right? If you're one of those churches, I'd humbly suggest, when you and your little ones are at church, that is not the setting where Stephen was martyred. Stephen was brought before the governmental council, and he was stoned for being a Christian. You don't know what these people are doing. There is no salvific relationship between your death and someone else's life, and that person's life. That person is going to be shot by the cops before the day's over. Okay. There's nothing happening. There's no movement of the Spirit. Stephen's death, though, did change people's lives. It was used by God. Your church's death, church members' death for no reason, that is an act of evil by Satan. And you should be a wall, as Jerry said. You should be a wall between that evil and the congregants, your wife, your kids, everyone else that you love in the church. So self-defense is, I would actually say, it is an imperative to the Christian, especially to the Christian man. Make sure you get training. Make sure that if you are carrying a gun, make sure you're carrying a trauma kit, at least in your car or your truck. Make sure you know how to patch holes. Making holes is much less important than being able to patch them, because typically you're going to have a situation like with the Lakewood shooting. You're going to have someone there who's going to need medical assistance right then, right there.
Correct.
Make sure you know how to patch holes, and if you're going to make holes, make sure you know how to make those and stay alive and not shoot a parishioner who's standing up, right? Know what you're doing. Do all things as unto the Lord. Make sure you're doing it for the glory of God and not for self-glory. And you know what? It's a good thing. God willing, you'll never use it.
Amen.
If you like this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you for hundreds of thousands of downloads on the audio version, anywhere podcasts can be found on Further Every Day. We're trying out a new segment here. It is the Apologist. Further Every Day is still here, but we're just trying to deal a little bit more with the apologetic side of things. That's something that you guys seem to be interested in. So
Good stuff.
let us know in the comment section what you think. And with that said, we got nothing else for you. We love you. Bye-bye.
And we like comments.
Okay, if you're still here, we do have one last thing for you. This is something we do to all of our guests. I don't know if you've been read in on this. Did Steve
I
tell
did
you?
see the question.
Okay. So let's open a can of worms real quick. One last question. Favorite caliber?
So I like a 9mm personally, and here's why. More times than not, it's going to be enough to do what I need it to do, but it's not always going to be lethal.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my mind and in my heart, if I can stop the threat without ending the threat's life, then I've been more of a peacemaker than I would have been if I used a gun that's going to put such a big hole in that there's no patch in that hole, as we talked about a while ago.
What kind of ammo do you load?
Different ones, but they're pretty high velocity.
If it's like Spear Gold Dot, it's basically an 88% one-stop shot kill.
Yep.
Of course, a lot of that depends upon where you place
There's
the
not
shot.
much on
That's true.
saving lives with that. That's good stuff.
That's focused on a A-box shot. But yeah,
Right.
Steve.
Yeah.
With me? Well, I'm going to preface this with, is it for self-protection or hunting?
This is the carry, the CCW debate.
CCW debate. Okay. All right. Because there's two different types.
If you
There are
say
different types that I
Okay.
use for different
Spit it out.
situations, so
Okay.
I'm kind of like
me
trying to find out there.
Give me both situations. Okay.
If I'm
Give me a
hunting
concealed
and
carry.
carrying a sidearm and I'm in the woods, 44 mag.
Okay.
Okay, my favorite.
Murder you
But-
with that thing. Well, that was a 357 you did that with.
But
anyway.
that's because that's what I had at the time. But I carry a 9, and I like that because I can
vanilla.
have a number of rounds with it, and the fact that I've got a large variety of types of ammo that I can use. They have really good ammo for self-defense for 9s, and you get really good velocity with a 9, which has a tendency to create a really good, should I say,
Wound channel?
Yes, wound channel with the ammo that you use. I like to use, say, the Hornady duty ammo or either the defense ammo, one of those two. I use the defense mostly more than the duty, and I shoot them a lot when I go to the range just to make sure I'm shooting real well with them. So,
bunch of vanilla hipsters in here. I'm shooting 9.2. There's no boomer opinion of they don't make a 46, so I carry a 45. This is good though. I agree because of carrying
45's
capacity and
too heavy.
size.
The other thing I like about my 9 is it's relatively simple to conceal.
correct.
And I do carry spare mags, and it's a quick change.
Yeah, that's it for me. I carry a modified Glock 19, so I'm able to carry 30+1, and it's very concealable inside the waistband. For what it is, it's a full-size handgun, but it conceals nicely, and you've got 15+1. That's a good starting at the gate.
And hopefully you never need those.
Yeah.
Hopefully, never do.
So tell us in the comment section down below what your favorite ammo is, and start a flame war down there. It's good for the algorithm.
Yeah.
Do I have any boomers with their 45s because they don't make a 46?
Right.
Because, Spirit Gold Dot kind of levels.
Or 47.
Yeah, or 47.
Right.
Like a President 47. Okay, that's it.
Right.
Goodbye, y'all.